Welcome to the first edition of Resource PNG for 2013. Thank you for your company. Decisions made in Parliament have a major influence on business in PNG, including the mining and petroleum sector. Here is an interview conducted by Ms. Anya Geno with the Prime Minister, Mr. Peter O'Neill, discussing some of the major decisions that his cabinet have made, including the decision of the seemingly ambitious budget.
My next guest is Mr. Peter O'Neill, the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea. Prime Minister, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Most welcome.
Now, sir, your government's just approved the biggest budget in the country's history. It's more than 5 times the budget of the budgets a decade ago. Do you think the budget will deliver 5 times as much services and benefits to the nation?
We will do our best to implement the budget as fully, but the history shows that successive governments have never fully implemented the budget. But our case is a bit different today, when we know that the economy is slowing down as a result of the slowing down of the construction of the LNG project. We have no choice but to increase the spending of government, particularly in infrastructure, given that we need to ensure that the growth of the economy is continued. If we do not, slow down will mean that a lot of Papua New Guineans will be out of a job. A lot of businesses will not be growing as well as they've been doing it over the last 10 years.
Right.
So it is very important that the government focuses on spending more resources into infrastructure. And of course, we are now increasing our spending on health and education,
yes,
meaning that we will increase spending by well over 50%. We understand that there are challenges there. There's capacity issues. Our challenge is now to build capacity around the districts and the provinces so that we can be able to deliver on the programs that government has highlighted in the 2013 budget.
Now, some budget measures suggest that the government may be concerned that many companies are not paying corporate taxes. Is this the case, and what measures are being planned to deal with that?
We understand that there are a lot of people, not only companies but also individuals, who are not paying the taxes that they are obligated to pay. We are now increasing capacity at the tax office. In fact, we are now trying to put a small team together, which will be added by some of our former commissioners for Internal Revenue Commission, to try and put a special unit within the tax office to see if they can increase the capacity of collection of taxes. We understand that many companies are delaying paying taxes. We would like those taxes to be paid up front. Government cannot afford to carry those costs anymore. We'd like IRC to also make assessments on a timely basis. Some assessments are now going over a few years. That means government is not able to collect the taxes that it's supposed to collect.
Right.
So we are building capacity. It means recruiting more people. We're also talking to our development partners, particularly OSAID, see whether we can recruit some people out of the Australian tax office so that they can be attached to our Internal Revenue Commission, so we can increase our ability to collect more taxes.
Right. What do you think are the major risks with promoting a budget with a large deficit?
Well, the major risks are that we must make sure we contain inflation, so inflation does not get out of hand. But we have been very fortunate so far. On average, our inflation is between 4 and 5% over the last 10 years. So there is history of a containment on the inflation fluctuations within the economy over time.
Right.
So we will try and keep a very close eye on that. Of course, the continuing strength of the kina is another issue, which means some of our exports will continue the revenues will continue to decline because of a stronger kina. And of course, if we do not contain our government expenditure within the appropriation that we've got, right, government must stick to the levels that we have now budgeted for. If there's any blowout or any increase, of course, there's a risk that the deficit will also blow out. Last year's deficit came about basically because of unforeseen expenditure on elections and related elections. We also have given a devolution of recruitment in the public service structure, whereby there was an increase in the number of public servants being employed by various departments throughout the country. So we are now cutting back on those. So we have restrictions on the number of staffing so that we don't have similar blowouts in the budget next year.
With so much money being spent, is there any danger that the country might go backwards economically as per the 90s?
The only danger is if we do not spend the money in productive areas. What has happened in the past is that we were spending money just paying people. It was not productive to the economy. What we are spending now is on infrastructure that will increase economic activity within the country. Better roads means better opportunities for our citizens to market their produce.
Right.
Better roads means better, lower cost for businesses to operate. So the infrastructure that we are building are strategic to growing economy. I'll give you an example about the investment that government is making in the Leh Port development.
Right.
We are spending over 700 million Kenya to develop that. But we know that there are big projects like Wafi gold mine is coming through. We know that there is increased traffic from the highlands provinces down to Leh. We're increasing the number of infrastructure between Leh and Nazab because of that. Mm-hmm. So I think we are investing in the right productive assets of the country and infrastructure that will underpin future growths in the economy.
Now, there's clear indicators that the budget's been quite well received definitely by politicians and lots of local commentators. Yeah. Do you think it might be creating high expectations? I
don't think so. I think the budget has been framed very in a very conservative manner and with a view of remaining within the Fiscal Responsibility Act that we have passed, meaning that the standards that are recommended by IMF and World Bank are complied with. I'll give you an example about staying within the limits of the debt levels that we have set for ourselves through an act of parliament. Mm-hmm. 35% of GDP, we are below that. We are projecting lower inflationary rates, and we are also projecting a very low growth, right, which is at about 4%. When we all know that the economy now is growing at 9, 10, 11%, we are projecting a 4% growth. So we have been very conservative in how we are framing the budget and how we will deliver the budget in the coming year.
Please don't go away. When we return, Mr. O'Neill will talk about some of the highlights of past budgets and how they differ from what the 9th Parliament came up with. Thank you for staying with us. Mining and petroleum brings in a lot of taxes for the government. From this revenue, Waigani puts the money into building our country's infrastructure and institutions. With the budget passed in 2012 for this fiscal year, Mr. O'Neill and his cabinet have changed the government's approach to how money is allocated.
What do you think are the biggest differences between this budget, and what do you think are the highlights?
Biggest difference is that we are now investing more in infrastructure. It's never been invested as such. In the past, very small amounts of maintenance funds were allocated for infrastructure in the country. Now we are rebuilding some of the major infrastructures. As I said about Nazab to Leh to Nazab Road, we are now designing the major trunk link roads throughout the country, including 20 kilometers in and out of Goroka City, Mount Hagen City, 20 kilometers in and out. We're trying to extend the road network in there, designing the work that is going down from Mount Hagen to Medan, almost finalizing the road linking Kikori up to the highlands from the Southern Highlands Gulf Highway. We are designing the roads in and out of Wewak, 20 kilometers either way. Right. Designing roads in and out of Medan, 20 kilometers either way. It gives us capacity also to expand those towns. So that when the road network is there, of course, businesses and people will try and move slightly out of the town boundaries so the towns continue to expand. It also creates opportunity for businesses to grow, yes, creates opportunity for people to gain gainful employment as a result of all this infrastructure that we are trying to build over the next 5 years. So in some places in 2013, we are going to design and cost it out. In 2014, we'll start building. In health and education, we are focusing on few hospitals that we want to get off the ground. We are continuing to fund the hospitals in particularly maintenance and infrastructure development in some of the major hospitals. Mm-hmm. We are focusing to try and get Port Moresby up to a world-class hospital facility within 2013. So there is a greater emphasis going on many sectors across the country.
Yes.
In education, of course, many of our citizens know now that we are rebuilding University of Papua New Guinea. We're trying to rebuild University of Technology, try and increase the capacity so more students can go in. We're trying to get provincial governments and local level governments to participate at lower levels of education, particularly in community school, primary school, and elementary. We are now allocating funds directly to the districts and the provinces for those purposes. So I think next year it'll be very much dependent on our capacity to deliver those programs. The funding we are comfortable with it. Budget appropriations are there for provincial governments and all the other agencies of government to deliver. And I'm hoping that we will make a real big difference in 2013.
It certainly sounds like it. Now, there's also a major review of taxes in the resources sector. Do you think that mining and oil companies are paying enough tax at the moment?
Well, in comparison, this morning's figures that were given to us by some of the experts indicate very clearly that our tax regime is fairly moderate and very competitive and very fair. So the review that we are doing is to see where we are positioned all around the world and compared to other regimes in our region, so that we remain competitive. That does not necessarily mean there will be cuts to the tax regime, but we will get an independent panel to talk to all the stakeholders, investors, government agencies. We talk to the landowners, all the participants in the industry, so that we have a tax regime that is fair, and Papua New Guinea as a country takes its fair share out of this resource boom that we are now experiencing.
Right.
But it will not be aimed at trying to be a deterrent to many of the investors who are coming into the country. We must be balanced for all the stakeholders to benefit fairly and equitably across the country.
Yes. Now, Prime Minister, the budget also focuses on empowering the district level.
Yes.
I guess this is an implementation of the original 1995 organic law, the purposes of the bottom-up approach, if you will. Are there the correct checks and balances in place? How do you think this can be implemented?
Yeah. Well, two things come out of this budget is one, redistribution of the development budget down to the districts and the provincial governments. We know that there is capacity issues on the ground, where districts don't have proper district managers, some of them don't have proper district treasurers, some of them don't have even LLG managers. So what we are now doing is talking to the relevant government agencies, particularly Provincial Affairs and the Secretary for Department of Personnel Management, to find a way to build capacity so we strengthen the administration of these levels of the various levels of government. We are also talking to our development partners, particularly OSAID. Rather than having consultants sitting there in Port Moresby and all the major cities around the country, we are trying to get half of the employees of the OSAID program to be based in the rural areas. So I am certain that over a few months we will find a solid way of building capacity in those lower levels of government. We also now got the Australian PNG ministerial conference, which is now underway in Port Moresby, trying to finalize those arrangements. So we are aware of the capacity issues. We are also aware of the audit and inspection issues. So we are establishing a dedicated unit within the Department of Finance that will be responsible for on-the-spot inspections of all the treasuries throughout the country. Right. So there will be auditors going there regularly. There will be also inspections on the spot without notifying the treasurers that they are coming. Inspectors will go all around the country and do spot inspections. And hopefully those will now teach people to be a bit more accountable, a bit more transparent in the way they manage public funds at that level.
Thank you.
We'll take a quick break here. Do join us after for more. The cost blowout of the LNG project caused much concern in 2012. The current government is determined to raise those funds and are confident that they will meet that target.
Now, just to the LNG project, were you disappointed by the big cost blowout from 15.7 to 19 billion?
Well, that's huge for us. That's close to $300 million that Papua New Guinea has to find now to fund for its shares. We have no choice. If we do not fund it, that means our shares get diluted, and that means that we will have a lower shareholding in the project. So we are, in fact, going to have a owners meeting here in Sydney tomorrow, where I will be putting our position very clearly to the developer that this kind of cost blowouts are unacceptable. We all know the environment under which we operate in Papua New Guinea, particularly management of landowner issues. We also know that Papua New Guinea has got a high rainfall, so that you will have unnecessary delays in construction workers working on sites. And of course, growing economy and the strengthening currency also plays a key role in some of those cost blowouts. So we will be talking to the developer, which is ExxonMobil, with the other shareholders, and hoping that we can make some sense out of this project. But I want to assure our listeners throughout the country that all is not lost. There's upside to many of these issues. Yes, it's going to cost us a bit more money, but we are also trying to increase the production of LNG within the current project. Right. Meaning that rather than having 2 trains, we'll try and have 3 or more trains. So we are trying to mobilize some of the stranded gas that are too small to develop by the current license holders, and hopefully many of that will come into this project so that we can expand the project itself. So there is some upside to it, yes. But yes, it is unnecessary money that we cannot afford to invest in this project. We are taking it away from other priority areas to try and fund this. But it's a worthy investment for the future of our country.
Now, Cabinet recently approved a government plan to take up 50% of Interoil's gas resources. How does the government intend to fund this purchase?
Yeah, well, it's a very good question, because that project itself is quite a large project. We're hoping that will further strengthen our economy. We understand that we are going to go 50-50 on this project, because we feel that some of the resources we must maintain within the country so that we can develop our own industries within the country. We have huge issues about energy, particularly power, in many of our cities throughout the country. Papua New Guineans I don't believe that it's in our interest to watch all our resources being exported. I think it's fair that we develop our own people and their capacities so that they can improve their standard of living. I know we might not get the top price. If we export the resource, yes, we will get the top price, but the benefits that will come as a result of a cheaper power and cheaper energy through all our industries throughout the country are enormous. So that's a small sacrifice we have to make. Yes. But I think Papua New Guineans must know that this is a resource that can develop our country and give capacity to our businesses to expand their operations, and our consumers, particularly fathers and mothers who are living in houses that are paying huge power prices now. Yes. We can have a reduced cost of power to be available to them.
Prime Minister, the EDL Purari project, might that be a contradiction to what you've just said?
These are 2 separate projects. Interoil project that is going to be accessible 50% of the resource by government. It's going to be gas-fired projects and gas-fired generation all throughout the country. What we are proposing with PNG Power and others who are in the industry is that we develop power generation in many of the towns, and then of course the gas will be now transported by sea, just like fuel distribution. It's a similar concept, right? But it'll be immediately available. Whereas Purari is a big project that PNG Sustainable is developing with the view of trying to export much of the energy that has been produced at that project to Australian market, and possibly yes. To develop some major industry that they are trying to develop in the Western Province. But this is a long-term project. It'll be another 5 or 6 years before it really takes off the ground. Whereas the Interoil project and power energy supply to our citizens throughout the country is immediately available. Right. As soon as we have the project finalization taking place, of course we will now develop power stations to be established in Port Moresby, Lae, and many other parts of the country. Right. And of course we'll supply the gas through shipments all throughout, to making sure that reliable power is supplied throughout our country. So it is two separate projects, but one is the certainty is much higher than the other.
Right.
So we will wait until the PNG Sustainable comes with the final numbers on the Purari project. But I want to stress this again. We Papua New Guineans cannot wait and see while all our resources are being exported. That includes gas and energy.
True.
We have to also look after our own people. Nobody else is going to come and look after us. When we export everything, like oil now, we import fuel into the country, we are paying a much higher price. So it is also necessary for us to develop our own industries within the country so that we can provide cheaper energy to our people. So I know that there's always a temptation to export everything because you see higher value for the short term. But in the long term, I give you a guarantee that with an increase in population, now one of the highest increase in population in the world in Papua New Guinea, we've got 7 million now. In about 2020, we will have 20 million plus. So we have to look after these people. How are we going to look after them when they all will want power, when all of them will want better infrastructure? So that is why it is necessary that we start implementing some of these programs while we are addressing it today.
So far, we have discussed what is happening in the country. When we come back, we shall talk about PNG's international relationships. Australia has been an ally for a very long time. Those ties still continue. Let us listen in on the last part of our interview with the Prime Minister to hear what he has to say about the relationship we have with our international neighbours.
Thank you, sir. Now, you've had many meetings with your Australian counterpart, Ms. Gillard, and you've just recently addressed the National Press Club in Canberra. Do you see much more potential for Australian relations with Papua New Guinea?
Papua New Guinea-Australian relationship has never been better. I think it's in a much better shape than we were a few years ago when our incident happened with our former Prime Minister in Brisbane. But now we are working together with both sides of politics in Australia, particularly the government and also the Liberal Party. So despite their own internal issues, with Papua New Guinea we've got a very solid, sound bilateral relationship with Australia, and I'm encouraged by the reception that they have extended to Papua New Guinea. In particular, some of the development programs that they are now rolling out in PNG. We are saying to them, like every Australian taxpayer is saying to them, we want visibility in the aid program.
Yes. Meaning,
quite simply, that we want to see that AUSAID funded this particular project or this hospital or this major road infrastructure. At present, they are spreading their money too thinly. Even though we get a large chunk of money, Australian almost $500 million, we don't know where they're spending. It seems that there's no spending at all. So Australian government agrees with us that we must now focus on few major projects in the country. Let's fix one and then we go to the next one next year. If we have a plan as such, it'll mean that we are able to get better outcomes from all this. Secondly, we are now talking about visa entries for Papua New Guineans coming to Australia. As we know, they have accommodated now, we can have an online visa processing facility which is available to all Papua New Guineans. They are also trying to get all Papua New Guineans coming to Australia a dedicated line at the migration, so you don't have to line up with everybody. All Papua New Guineans going through a single point of entry at all the international points where our airlines come and land. And we are now trying to extend, and we're still in discussions about how we can develop a similar arrangement Australia as with New Zealand, so we can have similar arrangement with Australia and Papua New Guinea. We've told the Australians that we are now extending free entries for all Pacific Islanders to Papua New Guinea, and likewise for Papua New Guineans to go to all the Pacific Islands, work, live and do business there. We want to make it easier for our citizens to do the same. They can go and invest in Fiji or Solomon Islands or Vanuatu without any visa or restriction. All they need is their passport, so they have an identity. But we would like to have similar arrangements with Australia, so our citizens can have an opportunity to work here and a better living. We've got increasing number of Papua New Guineans already working here, and we've got tens of thousands of Australians working in Papua New Guinea. So we need to be a bit more realistic about the integration of the regional economy,
Yes.
particularly in the Pacific region. If you add the Australian population, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and rest of the Pacific, we are nearing close to 50 million. That's a fairly solid economic base for any region.
Yes, it is.
So if we integrate some of the efforts that we have in building up our economy, I think we can get a better outcomes than we are presently doing because of synergies that will develop as a result.
So a strengthened relationship.
It's very solid at the moment, and we are getting closer and closer.
Prime Minister, there's a perception that Papua New Guinea is looking more and more towards China, that there is a relationship being built there. What is your comment on that?
Well, I've expressed to Australian government and officials, and of course the media in Canberra, that Papua New Guinea, like Australia, like New Zealand, is seeking better trade and investment links with China. There is no issues with that. Australians are doing it, New Zealanders are doing it, all the other countries in the region are doing it. Why shouldn't Papua New Guinea develop a stronger relationship with China? We have no arrangements on security, defense relationships with China or any other Asian country. Traditional security arrangements are with America and Australia, and that remains so. So I've assured the Australian public and Australian government that there should be no panic, that there should be no panic about our relationship with China and Asia in general. We have an obligation to building up our trade relationships with them. We need to increase their investment in our country. Those opportunities are there for us to develop. One other matter that I want to stress very carefully is this. The loan facility that we are seeking with China is merely a facility. We have not borrowed the money except just under about 400 million US dollar for few projects already now well underway in Papua New Guinea. 6 billion kina is a facility that we may use or we may not use. Right. It depends on our requirement. It depends on our debt levels to GDP when we manage our debt strategy over the next few years. But for us, it's a facility that is available. Chinese leadership have stated that they are quite happy to go along with that arrangement. But the demands for us to borrow the money depends on Papua New Guinea.
Yes.
As and when we require, we will go out there and negotiate the terms. And once we borrow the money, we will announce the terms of those loans, like what we are doing at present. We are borrowing money from China, I think on average at about 20-year loans with a 5-year grace period at 2% interest rate per annum. So these are very favorable terms. Nobody else can lend us that kind of money in the current market. So we have to take advantage of such facilities so that we can build and strengthen our economy. I also want to add that our relationship with India is also very important. We now have some of the top companies in the Indian companies that we are now investing in PNG. Some of them are now like ESA, which is now developing the airstrip in Como under the PNG LNG project. So Indian investment is starting to come through. So we are now encouraging our companies to go to India and see if they can sell some of the LNG that we are producing, sell some of the resources that we are producing in our country, so that we can encourage that relationship. So I'm pleased to say that the Indian economy is also growing very strong. We note that these two superpowers are still got a lot of growth potential. Yes. And it is important for PNG to take advantage of those opportunities. We are very pleased as a government that we already have a bilateral relationship with India. We have an embassy that is now functioning in Delhi, and we will also now put in some trade officials to go and man that office so that we can encourage more trade and investment from the Indian government and the Indian and businesses in Papua New Guinea.
Thank you, sir. The Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, Honourable Peter O'Neill.
That was an interview with the Prime Minister, Mr. Peter O'Neill. When we return, we feature a part of his speech from the 12th PNG Mining and Petroleum Investment Conference. The Asian century, that is what economists have termed the period we live in. This is because within the century alone, we have seen much growth in Asia. How does the government feel about this? Here is a part of the Prime Minister, Mr. Peter O'Neill's speech delivered at the 12th PNG Mining and Petroleum Investment Conference.
What are the new challenges facing our resource sector? And how can government and stakeholders work together to meeting them and overcoming them? A few days ago, I had the privilege of addressing the Lowy Institute here in Sydney. It is, of course, one of the leading policy institutes or a think tank in Australia. It has always had a constructive interest in Papua New Guinea and its relationship with Australia. I was, of course, invited to speak on how we can benefit from widely regarded the Asian century. I hope you can share my conviction that Papua New Guinea is well placed to benefit significantly over a long term from the Asia's growth. We already do, in principally through export of our resources to China, Japan, Korea, and when LNG export commences, other countries as well in increasing volumes. We have had a level of investment in our resource sector for many, many years. It has grown in recent years, but it remains comparatively small when compared to investments sourced from Australia, North America, and Europe. Our engagement with the growing nations of Asia has wide benefits, but it also presents a couple of challenges that we frankly cannot neglect. The first is productivity. I think we already have dropped the ball when it comes to productivity, and that applies also to the resource sector and the other private sectors generally. The national and provincial governments, other agencies of governments, we are about to maximize our benefits from Asian growth as we prepare to compete in the resource-rich nations with other resource nations, and that is why productivity is very crucial. I think we have been far too complacent about cost blowouts in the construction phase of our major resource project. When the massive cost increase in the construction phase of the PNG gas was recently announced, it was pretty well shrugged off, except by the partners who have to fund it, including our government, of course. We have to get serious about cost of doing business in Papua New Guinea. We have really getting serious on developing, as we have now developing the downstream processing about our natural resources. We must demand that we cannot afford complacency about production costs. It is an issue my government must and will address as we seek more attractive incentives to attract more investors and, of course, leading to more revenues. But it is also an issue that our businesses in general must address. What I want is a direct dialogue between government and, of course, all the other stakeholders, such as the construction sector, the finance community, other medium to small size businesses, so we can drive down the production costs and manage to make sure that we reduce the impediments into production, processing as a very effective major competitor. We must, I think there is a need for us now to establish a productivity commission to advise government on the steps that has to be taken so that the economy becomes competitive. Of course, government welcomes all ideas on this proposal. The government is also making a start on this vital question by announcing that in the recent budget that we will now review mining and petroleum taxes and charges. The government understands, as its leaders understand, that mining and petroleum changes must be more than just a very welcome contributor to the budget process. We understand that they have to be imposed in a way that does not act as a significant disincentive to investment and to international competitiveness. That is why we are having a wide-ranging review of this process. The review will enable us to take into account the changing nature of the resource sector, and the impact that it has on our revenue. I cannot hold out the promise of massive tax cuts in this area, but I can promise a review that addresses all issues and looks at an open and transparent way of the aspect of us managing our tax regime and government charges, and where the cost, time, and that is consumed in lodging returns and reporting can be cut out. We must have a modern and competitive resource tax regime. This project will be a high priority for our government, and your constructive and comprehensive contribution will be fully welcomed and considered. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a really critical stage in the development of our mining and petroleum sectors. The record capital spending now underway in these sectors will significantly slow down in 2013 unless we bring new projects to approval and development stage. My government is fully committed to that happening, but we do not just want projects that have an export focus alone. We need the right mix of more LNG projects, such as now the Interval project, which we recently gave conditional approval to, and we need projects totally focused on our domestic gas and energy needs, including gas capable of driving our rural and regional energy requirements and meeting the energy needs of the new projects that are now about to be developed. Our government will help speed up the approval process and support the early development of all the stranded gases and other gas resources that will create more jobs for our citizens, boost investment in our country, and of course, meet the domestic energy demands. We also need new mining projects, not just the large-scale projects. The challenge I want to issue you today to our investors and those who are thinking of investing in our country is to look on taking on board Papua New Guinean investors and partners from the outset. We have a rapidly growing number of companies and individuals who have been very successful in their business lives. Many have benefited from the growing economy. We have very successful contractors, transport operators, engineers, and other professionals who can get access to funds that can be used to directly participate in the next phase of our resource sector development. Of course, we want to encourage our own businesses to do more in contracting and service work associated with these projects. And the government, through our 12-point plan to encourage small to medium business development, is looking at how we can assist our businesses to get a larger share of the work that is undertaken by contractors and suppliers. But I want to assure our resource sector companies to do more to encourage and facilitate actual investment in the new project by Papua New Guineans. We together must lift the national participation in the economy, and that is best done through private sector growth and encouragement and the support towards small to medium businesses.
We will have more of that speech when we return. Thank you for being with us. National participation is something that our government and people would like to see happen in PNG. Specifically, in the industry of mining and petroleum, there is a skill shortage. This is also an area that the government is trying to address.
Ladies and gentlemen, the final point I wish to make today, again, is about national participation. Successive governments have been reasonable, but if not too generous, when it comes to fly-in, fly-out arrangements for our major resource sectors. What I want to encourage is a review of these arrangements so that we can build more resorts and regional centers that can benefit from some of these projects. We are prepared to look at incentives to encourage companies to have their fly-in, fly-out schemes operate only in Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea has got a huge potential for tourism industry. That means we must build better resorts and facilities. We want the resource sector to partner us in making sure that we build these facilities. I know you have been very patient today, but there are one or two other issues that I just want to address before I conclude my statement. I am aware and concerned. I'm aware of the concern with regard to stability and certainty both in the mining and petroleum sector, with regard to ownership of resources and direct landowner participation in particular. Our position as government is based on a commitment to be fair and equitable sharing and distribution of the benefits from resource sector development to all stakeholders. We understand that this is a very sensitive issue. We understand it can have an impact on investor confidence if we do not manage it carefully and responsibly. I am sure those of you who know me well will understand my own background in business before I entered politics. Since entering politics, that means that I am sensitive to the issues that may have an impact on the investor confidence, on stability of the economy. We all must put our national interests first, and I'm certain that you do not expect me to do otherwise. In the national interest, it is our obligation to grow the economy, share the benefits of that growth, encourage and facilitate for national participation, which includes landowners. The undertaking I give you today is simply, there will be no drastic or radical change to laws that exist today, and there will be no immediate change. We will set up an independent panel to review the concerns that have been already expressed, and the resource sector will be fully consulted in this process. We must get the balance right, and we will only get it right through consultation and negotiation. We are well aware of the shortcomings that we have, particularly in our public service structure. Government is also prepared to invest more and do more in this particular area. We are aware of the shortage of qualified and technical expertise in many of our departments. Our government also commits to rebuilding and restructuring many of these departments to be more responsive and to meet the demands of a growing industry. So this conference, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this will be a welcome announcement for many of our potential investors and investors who are already investing in the country. Finally, Mr. President, this conference holds a very honored place in the calendar of the mining and petroleum sectors. All our stakeholders, many of our friends who are in business and who invest in Papua New Guinea, this conference gives them an opportune time to discuss many of the issues that confront this industry and other business sector of our economy. We have the right foundations for a strong mining and petroleum growth that can last a generation. We now have a very stable political system. We are tackling corruption. We are addressing many of the social challenges. We have a very strong economy, and we have a sound fiscal position. My invitation to you today is to join with me and our government, with 7 million men and women of Papua New Guinea, to maximize the opportunities we all have. Our mining and gas sectors have led the way in national growth. If we work together, if we involve our people in the growth of these sectors, then we will all share in the prosperity that will surely follow. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
That's all we have for Resource PNG. If you want to know more about the program, do drop us an email. And you're welcome to check out our Resource PNG page at www.mtv.com.pg. Until the same time next week, pleasant viewing.